They say never meet your heroes. I say think twice before replaying a game you loved ages ago. Think extra hard if Neverwinter Nights 2 was one of them. Since the enhanced edition is in the making, curiosity got the better of me. So I decided to gamble with my memories so you didn't have to gamble with yours. To examine the game as it stands before enhancement and answer the big question: is it really a bad rap, as some reviewers say today, or is it really that bad? Well, buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride. One of the most common criticisms of the original campaign of Neverwinter Nights 2 is that it has a generic story. While it's true, it's not a bad thing in itself. After all, BioWare in its prime excelled at making great games on absolutely stock ideas. That being said, I believe Obsidian Entertainment wanted to make the game accessible to D&D newbies. DOC is a typical zero-to-hero type of adventure in which a peasant from a god's-forsaken swamp rises up to save the Sword Coast. You don't need Forgotten Realms lore to understand such a story. If the goal was to promote D&D, I'd say Obsidian did the right thing by sticking to clichés. It's just that many other things went wrong along the way. The story begins with a laid-back prologue, which also serves as an optional tutorial, and right off the bat, you're hit with lazy writing and bad voice acting.
So many years ago today. My foster son is up and dressed, I see.
Really? Could I have some more exposition in the first 2 damned sentences, please?
Today is the High Harvest Fair, and the West Harbor Village Council requires me to man the archery competition.
Thankfully, once you've learned the basics and got to know everyone, the village is attacked and the story takes off. Soon, you venture forth alone on a dangerous journey to Neverwinter, and before you know it, the plot thickens around you. I know it might be tempting to jump right into it, but I recommend that you play the prologue because you don't say goodbye to West Harbor. You say, I'll be back. This, I believe, is where the original campaign is not given due credit. Past the slow prologue, it has a very dynamic early game. You're on a mission, you're being chased, you're being watched, and the story quickly introduces more antagonists, sort of in the background. A few hours in, you really have a lot on your plate. On top of that, the narrative toys with you, reinforcing that feeling of being hunted and stepping into a huge mess. Content-wise, Act 1 is the largest. In it, you turn your character from a swamp-dwelling peasant to a prominent adventurer in Neverwinter. Joining the City Watch or the Shadow Thieves, and the faction war that follows, is the highlight of that transformation. However, about 3/4 of the way, the pacing takes a critical hit. And so did I. Having played DOC way too many times back in the day, when I saw this, I got an episode. Dungeon crawling at the Old Owl Well is like cesspool diving, and I think cesspools have less crap content than those dungeons. Sadly, overlong, tedious levels like that rob the campaign of momentum when it needs it the most. Moving on, Act 2 is arguably the most interesting one. It starts with an investigation and a trial. The amount of effort you put into the preparations actually changes how things play out in court. Unfortunately, the trial is just a window dressing. You might pull off some rhetorical and judicial Kama Sutra, but the only difference it makes is who gets screwed in the courtroom. Whatever the sentence, the result is the same. Make no mistake, the original campaign tries to trick you with an illusion of choice and consequence. But save for the influence score with a few companions and your alignment in the late game, nothing else matters. Act 2 also introduces Stronghold management to the campaign. About halfway through, you are appointed the commander of a rundown stronghold called the Crossroad Keep. And frankly, it's the best one I've seen in any CRPG. It has very little impact on the story, true, but it makes you feel like the master of the castle, which is probably the whole point. You get to rebuild the place, recruit NPCs, raise an army, and make some managerial decisions, let's call them. If you don't mind heavy investments and exploiting the system, you can generate crazy money. It's like a real estate market simulator. At any rate, towards the end of Act 2, you'll start feeling how rushed the game was. I mean, Act 3 is basically a full-on sprint to the final dungeon. Still, the path to that final fight is bumpy and devious. There are some decent plot twists coming your way too, although I'm not sure what the overarching theme of the original campaign is. If I had to name one, I'd say it's sacrifice, heroic or otherwise, and whether it's ultimately worth it. Ironically, the same question can be applied to the time you will have sunk into the game by the time the credits roll. It's a quite big game actually. If you don't skip side content, I'd say 60-ish hours is what you have to set aside. However, the problem with sacrificing this much time to Neverwinter Nights 2 is that it has one of the most disastrous endings ever created. I don't think you can spoil it, but you'd think I'm messing with you anyhow. So let's put it this way, there's a good chance you'll ask yourself, why did I even bother? On top of that, the expansions do nothing to provide that much needed closure. If anything, Mask of the Betrayer only adds an insult to the injury and then salts the wound. To be fair though, evil characters can turn into villains and get a different, non-canon ending with a brutal final fight. The thing is, the path of evil in general is not worth it. It's obvious the designers assumed next to no one would play an evil character. And so, evil dialogue options were clearly an afterthought. It's mostly about being a greedy psychopath, no different than a highwayman except for life expectancy. Consequently, your character looks petty and stupid when facing the antagonists. It's like you challenged Satan himself for the throne of hell, but your only crime was using WinRAR without a license. Be that as it may, both the good and the evil path conclude with uninspired ending slides that even the narrator isn't excited to read. He sounds like he was kidnapped from the accounting department, sat in front of a microphone and told to read. As a matter of fact, lots of voice acting in this game sounds like it was done by random people rather than professional actors. But when you think about it, their delivery matches the quality of the writing. And this brings us to the root cause of the problem. The story is fine in the original campaign, but there's nothing remotely interesting about most characters in it. Like I've said before, well-written characters can save a mediocre story, maybe even a bad one, but it doesn't work the other way. Take Dragon Age Origins for instance. It is the same type of story, but its characters have superb writing and voice acting. In Neverwinter Nights 2, there's only a touch of that here and there. For example, the original campaign features sharply written, well-acted evil characters. They represent different kinds of and takes on evil, and serve various purposes in the story. It's interesting because in a cliched heroic adventure, you'd expect the good guys to run the show. Funnily enough, neutral and good characters struggle to reach mediocrity. Most of them are exposition and quest dispensers. Once they've played their part, you forget they even existed. When it comes to the joinable NPCs, they are a mixed bag at best. Half of them doesn't have any character arc, and it's not even clear why they stick around. It's quantity over quality because Obsidian chose to represent every class from the base game with a companion NPC. Ultimately, it backfired badly because they had to make huge content cuts to ship the game at all. If you want to see how butchered it is, I recommend you watch my Neverwinter Nights 2 cut content series. Ironically though, I think Obsidian wasn't bold enough with the cuts. To serve the story, you must be ready to kill your darlings. The Bard, the Sorceress, and the Paladin add nothing of value to the campaign. They should have been cut altogether or reduced to henchmen like those in the original Neverwinter Nights. The Cleric in turn is an exposition machine that highlights how rushed the second half of the game is. She suddenly appears in the story and tells you what you need to know and what you must do. It's like when a dungeon master tires of the players derailing his story, and so he starts to force them in the right direction. As for the rest of the party, it's a matter of taste. Mine has changed over the last 18 years. I can no longer put up with kleptomaniac teenagers with daddy issues, or trigger-happy dwarfs with Shaolin monk aspirations. And when they begin bickering, I wish permadeath was an option. But on the flip side, I've grown to appreciate the small representation of evil in the party. Those are two very opposite sides of evil too, with strong writing and voice acting. One is destructive and cynical, the other is ruthless but dedicated. And both are surprisingly relevant to this otherwise heroic adventure. Romance in Neverwinter Nights 2 barely deserves a mention. There are two romanceable companions in the game, and both romances are mind-numbingly boring. The Druidess is borderline creepy, although the Paladin does have an interesting rivalry with another male companion. The problem is that while the paladin wins the event, the other guy steals the show. Don't get your hopes up for the clingy tiefling girl either. Actually, it's interesting how two fan-favorite characters that many players wanted to romance had their romances cut. Just another reason for GOG to rename their release to Neverwinter Nights 2 Incomplete. As for the player character, I think they lack something that makes walking away not an option. The story simply assumes they care about the village and are okay with taking orders from their stepfather. Hell, he sends them alone to Neverwinter based on a giant assumption too. At that point in the story, the most reasonable thing to say would be, "You go to Neverwinter, old man," or better yet, "Go to hell." Having the story and characters out of the way, let's look at another problem of the original campaign, namely the rather bland level design. It has barely any eye candy and no interesting exploration opportunities. Just get from point A to point B and wipe out everything in your way. Although, to be fair, there are a few areas that look gorgeous under the right circumstances. Still, most areas seem like work in progress cut short. I've seen better level design on persistent worlds I played on as early as 2007 and 2008. And those were fan-made modules made at zero budget with the same garbage of a level editor. Sadly, the persistent world scene is practically dead these days, but I hope the enhanced edition will breathe a new life into it. Speaking of dead worlds, the one in Neverwinter Nights 2 is deader than dead. The city of Neverwinter looks like a cardboard movie set. NPCs are props and the city guard makes up like a third of the population. Now, compare that to Vizima in The Witcher. These games were made with the same engine and released only a year apart, and yet the difference between them is day and night. Hell, the day and night cycle and even weather affects the citizens of Vizima. Neverwinter townsfolk, on the other hand, will casually walk past flying fireballs. In general, Neverwinter Nights 2 constantly shoots itself in the foot with half-assed scripting and crappy camera work. Not to mention character models moving like they're trying to figure out bipedal movement. Early game combat looks especially weird. Combatants simply stand around for several seconds between attacks. They don't move around or anything like they did in the original Neverwinter Nights. And then there are the dead-eyed NPCs. Strangely, the game uses face effects. I think I saw facial animation only once though on Cernaval, but do let me know if you remember any other cases. Finally, with all that clumsy design, the absolutely epic music feels weirdly out of place. It's like playing Hans Zimmer to a school play. Luckily, the soundtrack is a great listen on its own. The final boss fight theme is one of the best of its kind I've heard, so be sure to check it out. Before we dive into the gameplay, I'm going to stop here for a second to talk about my sponsor. Just kidding. I wanted to remind you that most of the footage you're seeing shows my modded game. It is not representative of what the vanilla game looks like. At all. So I'm going to show you a bit of what you get out of the box for comparison. I'd also like to stress that those stutters you see occasionally are an in-engine issue, and I've had those on several different machines over the years. And finally, if you're interested in my mod list, you can find it in the description below. Now, let's talk gameplay. Neverwinter Nights 2 is a decent adaptation of Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. The rule set itself is dated though, which might alienate some modern audiences. It can be overwhelming with tons of classes, skills, feats, and other things with complex dependencies between them. The game doesn't explain as much as it should either. I mean, let's be real, expecting the players to read the manual was wishful thinking even back in 2006. As a result, non-D&D people will end up googling what the hell 1d12 is and if it's better than 2d6, not to mention character builds. Interestingly, I think difficulty is mostly fake in Neverwinter Nights 2. The game is very lenient towards the player, even on the highest difficulty setting. Compared to Pathfinder Kingmaker, which is based on a very similar rule set, it's a walk in the park. Let's see, resting is barely limited and you can't be attacked during rest. Companions never die permanently, and enemies have shoe-sized IQ. Unless you're doing something terribly wrong, only a handful of fights are challenging. The procedure goes like this: you win a fight, take a 5-second rest, and proceed to nuke the next mob of cannon fodder. Spell charges and duration barely matter in such an implementation of the rule set. At the same time, enemies don't use any nasty spells, items, or abilities, like they aren't even trying to put up a fight before you unleash hell upon them. On that note, the game favors murder hobos. You can talk your way out of combat occasionally, but to get maximum experience and loot, it's swords, not words, my friend. Sneaking, on the other hand, is an exercise in futility. Even if you were to try your hardest, it's not a sustainable solution. You'd waste tons of money, experience for kills, and time. And most importantly, there's a good chance you'll have to backtrack and ruin all your sneaking effort anyway. So, what makes this game hard, you ask? In short, things that make your party fight below their capabilities. Bad character builds, messy equipment, half-empty spellbooks, things like that. Strangely, it's largely a user interface issue of all things. Basically, warnings, dialogue history, and combat log are all jammed into the chat window. The text in it is tiny and easily missed. As for the spellbook, you must remember to check for empty slots and fill them yourself. For a casual player, this might be an issue. The level up screen is a bloated mess too. It doesn't help you develop your character at all. It's like the game assumes you know D&D and have character builds for the whole party written down. What feats to take, in what order, and the like. The good news is, if you're hopeless with that stuff, you can choose a pre-made character and level up the party with the recommend button. The resulting builds will get you through the campaign, but they are somewhat underpowered, probably on purpose. Another annoyance that makes the game more difficult is forcing specific companions on you during some quests. Since the party limit stays the same, you're forced to bench someone to make room for the uninvited guest. At the same time, there is one companion that is forced into your party for a while, but they come with their own extra slot. Why is that? We'll never know. The original campaign sometimes changes its own rules like that. On the upside, it's great that all characters have the same amount of experience points, even if they are not in the party. This way, they don't lose viability as your current lineup levels up. The only thing that's missing is a way to re-level them from level 1 without cheating. Currently, they come pre-leveled to an extent and likely wearing junk items compared to the rest of the party. And speaking of items, I feel like only a fraction of them makes sense. There are either piles of overpriced junk in stores, or I don't understand the game mechanics as well as I thought I did. Crafting, on the other hand, is too much hassle. You will be fine with the stuff you loot or buy off the shelf. In retrospect, I think whether Neverwinter Nights 2 is a good adaptation of D&D 3.5 depends on the module. The game itself is just a tool. The official single-player modules don't use it very well, especially the original campaign. Now, multiplayer modules are where the game shines. Remember, the original Neverwinter Nights was a platform for user-created content first and foremost, and it did not change in Neverwinter Nights 2. Competent dungeon masters and custom systems make all the difference. If we think about single player only, I believe the real-time with pause genre peaked with Dragon Age Origins. And then it started being stuck in the past, unlike the turn-based genre. But your mileage may vary. Finally, Neverwinter Nights 2 is often annoying to play. There's a litany of issues Obsidian never fixed in the game client. The original campaign simply adds its own problems on top of them. Without the heart-shaped glasses of nostalgia and some serious modding, it's not the easiest game to enjoy. That being said, I don't envy whoever is making the enhanced edition. Were I to say what they needed to enhance, I would say, finish the damned game. As far as the title goes, it's such a shame Neverwinter Nights 2 Complete is already taken, because that would be the most appropriate one. As it's used today on GOG, it borders on false advertising. It was late 2006. Dual-core CPUs were still a new thing, PlayStation 3 just launched in the US, and emos were still around. Me, I borrowed this hot new game from a friend at school. It was just before midnight that December night, but I decided to give this game a quick half-hour try before I hit the bed. Next thing I knew, my mom barged into the room a few hours later. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" she roared. Well, I got caught playing Neverwinter Nights 2 until the small hours, enjoying it like it was the best game ever made, and it surely felt like it back then. Fast forward to today, people who pooped their diapers at the time have been legal drinking age since last Halloween. Still no Neverwinter Nights 3 in sight, but Neverwinter Nights 2 Enhanced Edition is finally happening. I'm no optimist, but deep down, I hope it will bring back even a tiny bit of the excitement I felt that memorable winter night. All in all, I will always have a soft spot for Neverwinter Nights 2. But nostalgia aside, the original campaign is really bad by today's standards. As it stands, it's a mediocre, overlong prologue to Mask of the Betrayer at best. I could never recommend it to a newcomer in its current state, and those tempted to replay it should keep their fun memories intact instead. Let's just wait for the enhanced edition and see what happens. Speaking of which, do not set your expectations too high. What was cut will probably stay cut. Giving the original campaign the complete makeover it needs would mean months of designing, scripting, and testing. Plus, there's an issue of localizing any extra content into 6 languages. I don't think the popularity of Neverwinter Nights 2 warrants a remaster that thorough. But if the persistent world scene comes back from the dead and new single-player modules drop, I will be more than happy. And more than busy with new Neverwinter Nights 2 videos. In the meantime, thank you for watching this one, and I hope to see you in the next one.